Over the course of the past decade, Pyrocynical, also known as Niall, has consistently gotten away with inappropriately engaging with numerous alleged significantly younger than himself while he was an adult. His response video to the initial allegations pushed by Ivory, created over 4 years ago, while at first may have seemed as a cohesive defense, actually in reality served to muddy the waters of the situation and was in fact riddled with many lies, in which this video will entirely address. My document, in which I have created comprehensively going over this situation, has been split into numerous videos. This video will highlight how Pyrocynical had consistently lied to his viewers and will prove him to be a compulsive manipulator who engaged inappropriately with while he was an adult. This video will highlight how degenerate Pyrocynical's dynamic with Ivory actually was, with Pyrocynical continuing to message Ivory after he knew him to be 16 while he himself was 20, and despite Pyrocynical using the age of consent justification to excuse the 4-year age gap, it will also highlight succinctly how the dynamic between them was, as well as the pattern of Pyrocynical having posted content to Ivory over the course of well over a year, which was illegal in Ivory's state of Pennsylvania. It will also highlight examples of Ivory and Pyrocynical attempting to commission furry content of their characters together, as well as role-playing with one another, despite Pyrocynical using a Discord script to systematically wipe and delete his messages as to not incriminate himself. This video will also highlight how Pyrocynical most likely knew that Ivory was a long before he claims to have known, with numerous statements Ivory made serving to be distinct red flags indicating that he was. And despite these red flags being present, it did not dissuade Pyrocynical from engaging in topics to do with Ivory's life and his experiences. This video will also prove that the French girl existed, and that Pyrocynical had dated the girl, named Luan, when she was years of age, and her age was publicly known on Twitter and attested by her in an interview she had with Keemstar. This was all while Pyrocynical himself was 18 years of age in 2015, as detailed by Luan. Most importantly, Pyrocynical stated he would wait for Luan to turn 16, the legal age of consent in the UK, to then engage in a proper relationship with her while he would have been 20, which is a massive red flag and clearly indicative of. This video will highlight how Pyrocynical actively lied to his fanbase for over 6 years, claiming that the girl never existed and that Keemstar was a liar, to then being caught by Keemstar with Twitter message logs proving that he was in direct contact with her, to which Pyrocynical then responded on Reddit, conceding that the girl was real, however lying about the age gap dynamic and lying about never having a relationship with her, to once again manipulate his fanbase and to lie directly to their faces. And finally, this video will also highlight how Pyrocynical at the age of 19 pushed a 15-year-old girl that he knew the age of to create furry art of his character, and severely downplayed the situation in his response video, attempting to claim that the image was not, despite it being evidently suggestive, containing a disproportionate parts with hyperfixation around the region, and with it posing in a position. Victims have been harassed, silenced, victim blamed, and ultimately been too afraid to come out regarding Niall's actions due to the harassment often instigated from his fanbase. So this video serves as part 1, followed by others to come. All the videos that will come out will serve to unilaterally correct the record and cover many more allegations that are currently unknown to the public, and cover and substantiate a lot of victims' allegations. This specific video will prove that Pyrocynical lied to his fanbase for many years and actively manipulated them. So now I bring you the Pyrocynical files.
Near future, let me just say this right now. I am calling it right now, okay? Pyrocynical is going down, okay? This time for real, okay? Pyrocynical is gonna get caught doing some nasty.
Your friend, your buddy came out and lied multiple times on Reddit about that scenario.
Okay, I mean, he's already an open degenerate. There's no telling what he's capable of, okay? Pyrocynical is gonna go down.
There is a long history of degenerate, unjustifiable behavior from Pyrocynical. This story is far from over.
Now, Ivory Rasmus was once a close associate of Pyrocynical's, having originally started speaking to Niall as of the 11th of November 2016, up until Ivory made his infamous call-out post on October the 29th, 2020, accusing Pyrocynical of having taken of him when he was 15 and Niall was 19. As a result of the drama that followed, the end result left many people to believe that Ivory was a clout-chasing liar, prompting them to tarnish his reputation and spread numerous examples of misinformation regarding his experiences. People flocking to Niall's defense attempt to claim that Pyrocynical was completely innocent and he unilaterally never knew Ivory's age and that Ivory purposely withheld it. This is all a categorical lie. Pyrocynical admits in his own response video that he knew Ivory was 16, once Ivory linked his Twitter account with his age present in bio, clearly stating he was 16 on July the 5th, 2017, when Niall himself would have been 20.
When Ivory linked me his Twitter profile, the age in bio says 16. This is something I acknowledged in my Reddit post, but to be fair, I probably didn't elaborate enough on it. In retrospect, I never should have continued the furry stuff with him once I learnt of his age, even though at the time I didn't see it as a problem.
This admission goes overlooked by the majority of people because Pyrocynical waited until 9 minutes in his response video to state this. Pyro had even admitted verbatim that once he learnt of Ivory being 16 years old, while he himself was 20, he still continued to engage with him nonetheless, even after knowing him to be a significantly younger than himself, and this can be corroborated by numerous Discord messages in which I will cover and highlight in this video, despite Niall attempting to mass wipe his messages to cover his complicity in these degenerate conversations.
But let me be very clear, I had absolutely no idea that he was 15.
Pyrocynical's only actual defense in this entire situation was that he simply didn't know Ivory's age when he was 15 at the start of their conversations, when he himself would have been 19. According to him, he only knew Ivory's age to be 16 when it was specified on July the 5th, 2017, and that is a very important date to remember. However, as we'll discuss later on in this video, this defense has numerous red flags and contradictions, as Ivory clearly made it known he was below the age of 18 far before Pyrocynical claimed to have known that he was 16 in his response video. And Pyrocynical's plausible deniability excuse where he claimed that he could not have possibly seen the numerous tweets made by Ivory where he clearly stated he was 15 because he was suspended on Twitter during the same time frame and therefore couldn't access the platform turns out to be a lie as well. Now, the age gap between both Ivory and Pyrocynical was 3 years, 11 months, 7 days, with a borderline 4-year age gap between them, with Pyrocynical being more than aware of Ivory's date of birth, which was not only specified directly to him, when Ivory was seen venting about drama that he was finding himself on in his birthday by showing Twitter messages he was receiving by a user named Eli, having clearly been sent on the 21st of April, but it was also public knowledge with him clearly having it presented on his Twitter bio. So when Pyrocynical claimed to have initially known Ivory's age as of July the 5th, 2017, after taking into consideration his date of birth, he was clearly able to decipher that Ivory was 16 years 2 months old, and that there was a borderline 4-year age gap between them, as Pyrocynical was 20 years 1 month old himself, and yet he still continued to inappropriately engage with Ivory regardless. It is important to take into consideration that developmentally, a 16-year-old and 20-year-old are in completely different life stages as well. There is a distinct maturity difference present in a 4-year age gap, and it is also important to highlight the power dynamic in play here as well. Ivory made it known that he was a large fan of Pyrocynical, and Niall played into that dynamic. He used his position to behave with Ivory, who looked up to him and was complicit in engaging with this fantasies, and that behavior is unilaterally looked down upon across the online community and is inherently immoral and unjustifiable. Somehow though, Niall has received consistent defense and belittlement for his actions, despite other creators such as Squimbus McGwimbus' case being strikingly similar. Squimbus was a popular Five Nights at Freddy's content creator who was initially 17 years old when he was seen discussing based subjects to a 4-year-old and posting based content to their DMs. This behavior lasted up until he was 20 and the was 16. This was unilaterally condemned by the online community, resulting in Squimbus being ostracized from the platform that he once had. Oddly enough, however, despite the situation bearing an exact comparison to the Pyrocynical situation, Pyrocynical has managed to escape relatively unscathed. The argument Squimbus had made that based discussions were not inherently as well was immediately discredited by the original poster of the allegations too on Twitter. The double standard is glaring and couldn't be more obvious. The age gap between both Ivory and Pyrocynical is inherently, and not only does Pyrocynical claim in his own response video that at the time he didn't acknowledge a 4-year age gap as significant enough, but he is also seen attempting to use the age of consent laws of his country, the United Kingdom, and Ivory's state of Pennsylvania to once again belittle the severity of the situation and to try and justify it.
Legally, age of consent is 16 in both my country and his state. I didn't consider the age gap significant enough because what we were talking about and doing was so far removed from actual.
Age of consent is 16 in most states. Age of consent, man, that's not what you need to go by.
Age of consent laws do not now morally justify the age gap dynamic present, and its defense, regardless, falls flat when taking into consideration that the age of consent laws do not cover Pyrocynical for the fact that he consistently posted furry to Ivory after admitting that he knew that he was a following July the 5th, 2017, but continuing nonetheless. Ivory State, Pennsylvania, comprehensively states that the dissemination or distribution of content to a under the age of 18 is illegal regardless of age of consent laws. Content can be considered any drawing with opaque clothing or focus around the area, or specifically as well, the content Pyrocynical would send would appeal to Ivory's interest while he was still a. This is specifically established as another factor that would define it as harmful and content, ergo illegal to have posted to Ivory. Ivory is also seen attesting this himself, and that he made a police report in regards to it. So not only was the dynamic, but it was also illegal. Now, despite Discord mobile recordings of Pyrocynical contacting a user named Faf9 on how to use a Discord script to comprehensively purge messages, and having wiped a considerable portion of his DMs with Ivory, to which Ivory attests to Ida being Pyrocynical's girlfriend in 2020, it is still relatively easy to decipher exactly what took place, and this needs to be taken into account moving forward when analysing the remnants of the Discord conversations that I'm going to highlight. Just because Pyrocynical purged Discord messages does not now limit his culpability in this situation. It's clear he systematically removed messages for a reason. In the messages provided by Ivory on video, you can see that Ivory has been pressed by Pyrocynical to remove specific messages that he had sent, as Ivory was seen mentioning he didn't know how to in response. Pyrocynical consulting about removing their messages is seen throughout other allegations too, and shows a comprehensive pattern of Niall attempting to hide and conceal his behaviour. Such examples were seen in his DMs with Trippy Fox in 2016 when he was 15, or his behaviour to another 15-year-old boy named Saku 2, where Niall was seen mass purging his messages, but that will be all covered in a separate video. In DMs between Pyrocynical and Ivory, Pyrocynical's older messages remained before April the 7th, 2017. So when we cover instances of Ivory having what seems to be one-way roleplay discussions, or referencing and describing artwork sent to him, we can easily discern that Pyrocynical had engaged and was complicit in these topics of conversations. This is because by viewing older messages present between both Niall and Ivory that still remain, Pyrocynical was seen having roleplayed with Ivory and having sent him based content. The idea that Ivory was just messaging himself in Pyrocynical's DMs is highly illogical, especially when Pyrocynical was seen referencing in his own video that he continued the furry discussions and based roleplay after he learned of Ivory's age being 16.
In retrospect, I never should have continued the furry stuff with him once I learnt of his age.
However, the messages of Pyrocynical's that remain to this day were sent at a time where it is unproven that Pyrocynical knew Ivory to have been a. Despite numerous people close to Ivory, such as Saku, attesting that Pyrocynical knew Ivory's age to be 15, along with others at the time, in this video I wish to solely focus on showing the Discord message exchanges that took place after Pyrocynical was absolutely proven to have known that Ivory was 16 past July the 5th, 2017. Then I wish to show more proof later on down the line that Pyrocynical most likely knew Ivory to have been a long before that day and had continued based topics regardless. Pyrocynical's behaviour of repeatedly sending suggestive or very content to Ivory after claiming to have known his age to be 16 is clearly exhibited over the remainder of 2017 up to 2018, early 2019, when Ivory was 17 and Pyrocynical would have been 21. The argument that Pyrocynical cut off communications with Ivory after knowing his age is completely false, and the idea that Pyrocynical or Ivory did not derive satisfaction from the base content too is factually untrue. But now I wish to quickly focus on Pyrocynical's attempt at word semantics to water down the severity of the situation.
What we were talking about and doing was so far removed from actual, but this never escalated from two morons talking about inhaling furry farts. It was roleplay after all. You're just pretending.
Pyrocynical's attempt at wordplay manipulation to downplay what actually transpired in DMs between him and Ivory serves to make it look less malicious than it actually was, and obfuscates crucial context behind the situation. The idea that it was so far removed from actual, as Niall puts it, changes absolutely nothing about this dynamic. He was a 20-year-old man playing into a 16-year-old fan's fantasies. The defense that it was just roleplay does not fundamentally change the nature or the topic of Pyrocynical's conversations with Ivory. By examining the Discord mobile messages Ivory had with Pyrocynical's Discord account after he had wiped his messages, you were still clearly able to discern that not only did Pyrocynical consistently share furry content to Ivory throughout the ages of him being 16 and 17, judging by Ivory's responses, but Pyrocynical had also roleplayed with Ivory and engaged in those topics of discussions, and also entertained the idea of commissioning of both his character and Ivory's character. He actively entertained and engaged with fantasies and simply brushed it off as specifically furry fart roleplay to undermine the severity of the situation and to make it seem less morally outrageous and more humorous. The fact he systematically expunged his messages with Ivory is also further proof of his guilty conscience coming into play, as he is seen sweeping his messages under the rug. Now, in order to prove that the account that Ivory is seen scrolling through DMs with was the actual Pyrocynical, this can be provided when pasting the exact ID of Pyrocynical's account that owned his Discord server as provided by bot logs. Copy and pasting this ID in a Discord ID resolver website will produce a Discord tag of an account that matches identically to the Discord account that Ivory was seen messaging in the video where he was scrolling through DMs. To argue that these messages were not with the actual Pyrocynical is completely false. Now that we've proven it to have legitimately been Pyrocynical, let's go into detail regarding their messages after Pyrocynical had claimed to have originally known that Ivory was 16 as of July the 5th, 2017. First situation to observe is by examining remnants of the Discord messages sent on the 8th of September 2017. Ivory is seen in these DMs engaging in RP with Pyrocynical, also known as roleplay, and was going into detail about his fantasies about wanting his character to engage with Pyrocynical's Fox Sonar. Such topics Ivory brought up include and these conversations were not shut down by Pyro whatsoever, and judging by the fact that Ivory was seen continuing, it was evident that Pyrocynical was complicit in the facilitation of these messages and topic of conversation. By seeing Ivory state true and ooh, it was evident that Pyrocynical was engaging, and Ivory was responding to his messages, so best case scenario already looks dire for Niall. He was essentially 20 years old engaging in a roleplay with a 16-year-old boy, where the topics of theoretical acts were introduced. These message exchanges were also followed by Pyrocynical most likely asking Ivory if he wished to see more furry following these based conversations that they just had, to which Ivory obliged. This was then followed by what we can understand to be numerous intervals where Pyrocynical had sent furry to Ivory, of course before all his messages were systematically wiped. We can gather the fact that these instances were inherently as well due to Ivory going into detail about the images, with the conversation then continuing to mutual-based discussion once again. Another such example takes place on August the 4th, 2018. Ivory, who was 17 at the time, is seen stating that he personally to be furry content that Pyrocynical openly provided him, describing in detail the nature of the content and stating how it happened forever ago, meaning that Ivory could have been 16 or even younger at the time of this incident. Shortly after this, Ivory had asked Pyrocynical if he ever to artwork of his fursona, and it is relatively easy to decipher that Niall most likely stated yes, because by analysing archived message logs provided by Ivory, he's then seen replying after with, "Wait, what, you did? God bless." It's understandable why Pyrocynical proceeded to cherry-pick certain Discord logs in his response video, because I'm certain if people knew that he possibly derived satisfaction from content based off a character while he was an adult, or that he gave to Ivory to which Ivory admitted he derived from, that may not give him the best look optically. The topic of 2 was also brought up on the 23rd of September 2017, where it is easy to discern that Pyrocynical was engaging with Ivory in reference to him stating that he hasn't to any furry chart as of currently, with Ivory then being seen having sent a message saying shush in reference to Pyrocynical's deleted messages in response. The distribution of material between Niall and Ivory, as well as the facilitation of conversations, was prevalent and was continuous. It wasn't an isolated incident, it was a long pattern of behavior, and Ivory attests he wasn't the only one who Niall did this to, which is an objectively true statement. My document highlights and substantiated allegations of numerous other victims in which I will cover in my next videos, which all show a glaring and concerning pattern of behavior of people who were once close to Pyrocynical when they were being subject to Pyrocynical allegedly engaging inappropriately with them and posting material to them. It wasn't one person, it wasn't two, it wasn't even three. It was a consistent pattern of more than 10 of these allegations pertaining to 13 days after Pyrocynical claimed to have known Ivory was 16, message logs provided show Ivory having described in detail one of the instances of furry content that Pyrocynical had just sent to him, followed up by Ivory stating he liked the second furry image the most, perhaps in response to Pyrocynical being intrigued to which instance he liked more. On September 11th, 2017, Ivory is seen having posted furry images directly to Pyrocynical, commenting on how shiny the characters look. This was then followed by Ivory stating, "That's pretty good," and "ooh," to which we are easily able to decipher that Pyrocynical had originally sent Ivory suggestive and furry content back to him, which warranted Ivory making that response. This then prompted Ivory to make inappropriate comments in reference to the content which was just provided to him. Ivory was then also seen going into more detail about the content that Pyrocynical had provided him, making comments about the parts shown in the content and talking about the present, with Ivory also making a comment about how he wished to bury his face in them. On September the 15th, Ivory and Pyrocynical were seen engaging in topics of discussion to do with what type of fat furry art they liked the most, with Ivory reacting to art Niall had provided him at age 16, sharing numerous Twitter links to W content that he personally admired as well, reciprocally. This was followed 2 days later on September the 17th, with Ivory seen stating, "do show" to Pyrocynical, and then "ooh" in response to Niall being presumed to have sent him more furry content, to which Ivory is seen stating he likes the last instance the most. Ivory is then seen reciprocally sending furry imagery back to Pyrocynical, mentioning how he likes the harness present in the image. What transpires next is Ivory going into detail about the fat present in the images, with Pyrocynical having been believed to have been complicit in the topic of conversation due to Ivory stating "ooh" in direct response to Pyrocynical's purged messages. Ivory is seen mentioning and fantasizing about the sweat, the mask, and the weight, all factors that played directly into his in real life fantasies. Ivory was even seen stating to Pyrocynical, "It's fine man, I like seeing it anyways," most likely in reference to Pyrocynical continuing the fluidity of this conversation by sharing furry-based art to him, with Ivory once again being seen going into detail about what his furry character would be doing to Pyrocynical's character, to which these conversations were not shut down, but simply just instead allowed to continue by Pyrocynical himself. During December the 29th, 2017, once again it can be deciphered that Niall sent more content, with Ivory making another reply in reference to receiving the image. Ivory was then seen responding with certain that he was interested in, most likely in reply to Pyrocynical having asked specific questions in a now deleted message. Ivory highlighted his interest in which is a homo media and manga in which is often, followed by him also stating that he likes and being quote-unquote. Now, another large piece of misinformation spread by people who attempt to defend Niall's behavior is that apparently Pyrocynical and Ivory had originally met up in an 18+ roleplay Discord server. Ardent defenders of Pyrocynical utilized this excuse to play into the idea that Pyrocynical must have been originally under the idea that Ivory was an adult at the start of their messages, because Ivory was believed to be present in an adult space, giving anyone the reasonable belief to assume that he was an adult. However, this claim turned out to be completely untrue. Not only is no proof ever provided of this, but in a document I have compiled myself, it covers extensively how Pyrocynical and Ivory originally met up on November 2016, and a YouTuber named Solid Shibe's Discord server who was 15 to 16, close in age to Ivory, and were both in fact friends, and Solid Shibe was a close associate to Pyrocynical too. Numerous archive screenshots were provided of Ivory being present in this Discord server before they originally got in contact with Pyrocynical, even being allowed to have admin permissions in a certain instance, and the server, while containing edgy humor and examples of inappropriate content, was ultimately expected regardless because the server contained many people who behaved extremely edgy for attention in 2016. Even other old members of Solid Shibe's Discord server, such as Krasputis, had also attested that Ivory met up with Pyrocynical in this specific Discord server. The idea that the server was completely and unilaterally is categorically untrue, as well as considering the fact that Solid Shibe, the owner of it, was widely known to have been a at the time. Commentary YouTuber Diesel Patches in 2020 was the original person who brought up the idea that Niall and Ivory could have met in an 18+ Discord server in his initial video covering the allegations. However, in his follow-up video, he went back on the claim, highlighting that it was only a speculative remark in which he brought up in order to play devil's advocate in Pyrocynical's favor, and prefaced the fact that people should not take it as face value.
Before I talk about the new updated version of the Pyrocynical allegations, I need to address a comment I made in my last video. So on my last Pyro video, I made the assumption that Pyro and Ivory came from an 18+ community. The reason why this is an issue is because some people treated that as a fact because I didn't clarify enough that my comment was merely an assumption. The reason I assumed this is because I wanted to give Pyro the benefit of the doubt, but it doesn't matter anymore because after looking at the new updated allegations, it's pretty clear that he's in the wrong. So again, please refrain from using that as the #1 defense for Pyro. As far as I know, there isn't any proof that Pyro and Ivory came from an 18+ server.
Unfortunately, due to his initial video getting over 600,000 views, many people ended up believing this to be completely true and didn't bother watching his second video clarifying the situation. So they went around spreading this story without verifying the authenticity of the claim, and it is still being used to this day as some legitimate defense for Niall. Another claim used was that Ivory initially lied about his age to Pyrocynical. Now, not only did the original people who claim that Ivory lied about his age go back on their narrative, but Pyrocynical himself is seen attesting in his own response video that Ivory never lied about his age to him. He only affirms that he never knew that Ivory was at the start of their conversations.
Me including the anecdotal evidence led to the belief that Ivory lied about his age. That is never a claim I have made that he has done to me. I've only said that I did not know his age at 15.
However, as we'll discuss later, Ivory has sent a plethora of messages clearly building the case that he was to Pyrocynical far before Pyro claims to have known on July the 5th, 2017. Now, in reference to the term thick content that is often referenced by Niall and Ivory alike, the idea that the thick, furry content that Pyrocynical and Ivory consistently posted to one another was not overtly or played into both their fantasies is simply misguided. Ivory was even seen himself stating that since a certain artist was good at creating content, they would probably be good at creating thick content as well. Ivory was even seen in early 2019 stating he's not been sent in a while, and then was seen specifically requesting for thick content. Thick art, as they refer to it as, directly correlated to content, and they made it no secret. The art is created specifically to cater towards one's fantasies and to elicit from viewing it, and many people in 2020 simply did not understand this at the time, hence why this behavior was overlooked and was simply not called out there and then. This correlates directly to August the 5th, 2018, where Ivory is seen bringing up that an artist was down to create suggestive, thick art of their characters together. Ivory is seen stating to Pyrocynical that his thick fox character could be with his thin Borbo sonar, and Borbo, for those of you who are unaware, is essentially in reference to Ivory's bird sonar, in which he is seen referencing to Pyrocynical beforehand. Now, once again, despite Pyrocynical having mass wiped his messages, it was clear that he was complicit in this topic of conversation due to Ivory's responses and the fluidity of the conversation. Ivory is seen stating yes, clearly in response to removed messages of Pyro's. Ivory is seen bringing up the idea of Pyrocynical's fat character sitting on top of his own character, and Ivory is seen posting a pre-existing suggestive furry image as reference, in which I will be censoring. Ivory prefaces the fact that he would only wish to commission the image if Pyrocynical was comfortable with the idea, to which we can decipher that Pyrocynical was complicit in agreeing to, as Ivory was then seen stating hell yeah to a deleted message of Niall's, and then proceeded to ask more details about how the drawing should look like, bringing up the proposition of Pyrocynical's sonar to have food smeared on the character's and dripping onto his bird sonar's face. Of course, this is extremely degenerate and inappropriate art that obviously elicits and derives for Ivory. This can be explained because Ivory expressed to Niall back on July the 4th, 2017, that his own partner when he was 15 would sit on his lap and it would be extremely intimidating. Clearly, this art played directly into Ivory's real-life fantasies, and Niall knew this, but was yet more than willing to engage with this while he was 21 years of age. Ivory is then seen discussing the commission price in regards to Ari, and then asking Pyrocynical if he wanted to commission the image or not, to which we can assume that Pyrocynical stated yes, which prompted Ivory to then be seen stating hell yeah in response. This was then followed by Ivory on the 23rd of October 2018, showing the sketch and the progression of the furry image created by Ari, meaning that Pyrocynical was completely complicit in the conversation and agreed to the creation of a furry image involving his character and a character. The fact that this went overlooked for so long is insane to process, and this is more than enough proof to show how deep the degeneracy goes in regards to Pyrocynical's dynamic with Ivory, who was still on May the 8th, 2018, Ivory was seen referencing a video that Pyrocynical had sent to him in DMs of content, to which Ivory directly addresses as quote-unquote. Ivory then goes on to make an comment in reference to the content, talking about the fat showing softness, when Niall is presumed to have asked him what his favourite aspect of the content was. And just to reiterate it once again, it is illegal in the state of Pennsylvania to send content to a. This can be assumed as to why Pyrocynical is never seen addressing these instances of content he sent to Ivory in his response video, or even going into detail about the content he sent regardless. In two other instances highlighted in my document too, Ivory is seen in August 2017 when he was 16, stating directly to Niall that the video he sent was nice, going into detail about the content that he just received. Pyrocynical in these instances had sent content relating to a he knew the age of, which is the and attraction to. On August the 20th on the same month, Ivory was seen bringing up the theoretical of his bird sonar being lodged in Pyrocynical's characters, followed by Pyrocynical sending based content to Ivory once again, with Ivory stating the first instance was his favourite, going into detail about the and how it was slipping off in the first image. It could be discerned that Ivory had stated this because Pyrocynical would have asked what image was his favourite and for what reason, once again prying into a and fantasies, and this was not the first time that Pyrocynical had allegedly sent furry content to him and had asked them if they liked the content too, as he had also allegedly done this to a girl on Skype in late 2016. This is a repetitive pattern of behaviour that the online community has sat idly by and allowed to continue. On the same day, August the 20th, Ivory had also brought up the idea of flying down to the UK to have dinner and hang out with his friends, to which he asked Pyrocynical if he wished to come too. Ivory is then seen stating, "Oop, I don't know honestly, and I have no idea when," in reference to what month they are planning to do this, with Ivory then seen stating, "But probably after December 2017. Ivory is then seen stating, "Hell yeah," in reference to Pyrocynical most likely agreeing to the proposition. This was also conveniently completely overlooked in the original allegations surrounding Niall, but what is clear by these logs was that Pyrocynical was seemingly comfortable with the idea of meeting Ivory, who was 16, along with his friends, while he himself was 20. Pyrocynical is then seen allegedly asking Ivory if he wants to see what we can assume to be more furry content, to which Ivory states, "Do send gamer," followed by Ivory then stating, "Ooh, I like the sounds to be honest." It is extremely evident from these archived messages that Niall sent some form of video to Ivory. Ivory is seen on October the 21st, 2017, having asked Pyrocynical if he wished to see some furry content that he had, to which Ivory is then seen stating "hell yeah" in response, and is then seen posting. Pyrocynical not only openly posted furry to a he knew the age of throughout 2017 and 2018, but he openly this content from the same too, as discerned by these messages. On April the 14th, 2018, Ivory was even seen messaging to Niall, "Do you remember how we were talking about art of your thick fox character my haunter," in reference to his own sonar. So as clearly established in these messages, according to Ivory himself in 2018, Pyrocynical and him had openly discussed the idea of possibly commissioning furry of their characters engaging in acts. Ivory even followed up by highlighting that he knows an artist who'd be capable of commissioning the art piece, openly highlighting however that he would only have the art commissioned if Pyrocynical was on board with it, to which we can assume that Pyrocynical was not at the current time. However, a conversational shift is observed that led to Ivory finding amusement in something that Niall had said, to which Ivory is then seen posting a furry image of Pyrocynical's first sonar engaging in acts with Roadhog from Overwatch. The image was inherently, and how Ivory even knew about this image existing is a completely different question. Ivory was seen perhaps posting it in reference to Pyrocynical originally bringing it up. The fact that Ivory stated that Niall and him were discussing the plausible scenario of having ever commissioned artwork of their characters together is already a massive red flag on its own. You see, Pyrocynical would want you all to believe that the dynamic between him and Ivory was merely just furry fantasy roleplay. But no, this was all a comprehensive years-long dynamic of them sharing in detail content and information pertaining to each other's and preferences. Pyrocynical, the adult in this situation, was complicit in the facilitation of these conversations and played directly into an fan's messages. That is indefensible, immoral, and flagrantly disgusting. No amount of comment purging can expunge how disgusting it was for him to have his power and influence the behavior of a fan of his who was significantly younger than himself. The collective stigmatization and silencing of Ivory, despite him being objectively right about everything Niall had done, is disgusting. Every person who has put down Ivory, brushed off his experiences, or blamed him for having engaged with Pyrocynical to begin with, all have served to silence and belittle a victim and victim blame, doing immense damage to the situation and only playing into Niall's benefit and allowing him to get away with it. On September 9th, 2017, Niall was seen instigating a topic of conversation to do with commissioning for a artwork of both his character and Ivory's character, prompting Ivory to have stated, "Oh yeah, how would I commission it?" followed by, or should I just say a big old fox boyo, in reference to how the image would be drawn, and obviously playing into the inflation Pyrocynical had. Ivory is then seen showing his Twitter messages with an artist named Talker, showing that he asked for a private commission. Ivory is then seen discussing the idea of having a blob version of Niall's character, in which he sends reference images to the artist, with Ivory specifying that he wishes to use his Hauntersona since he doesn't have a proper reference sheet for his bird character yet, and his Hauntersona is a character he has shown to Niall a lot, even including the W artwork he commissioned of it in the past. Ivory is seen highlighting that the artwork would cost $38, and Pyrocynical had even offered to pay for it, as judging by the flow of the conversation, where Ivory is seen stating, quote-unquote, "I paid anyway, so it's fine. No, it's fine, I already did. Ah!" showing that Pyrocynical was more than comfortable to pay for commission artwork of both his and a character together in a suggestive manner. Ivory was then seen stating, "Yeah, he said he would keep it private." The start of the sentence, "yeah," clearly shows that Niall had initially asked Ivory if the commission would remain private himself, prompting Ivory to affirm to him that it would. Ivory then shows the Twitter messages between him and the artist, showing that he sent a reference sheet of Pyrocynical's characters, which contained very content to the artist, followed by him asking Torcan if he was a private commissioner, to which Torcan stated he could make the art privately. It is abundantly obvious that Niall did not want this art to be public knowledge, so it would not be traced back to him. He was fully aware of how problematic it would all be for him if it was revealed that he was a 20-year-old man having a 16-year-old commissioned art of both their characters together. Now, Pyrocynical's main defense for how he didn't know Ivory's age, despite Ivory making his age publicly known on Twitter several times, stating that he was 15, was the fact that he was not on Twitter during the same time period as he was suspended, so he could not have possibly seen the tweets. He deliberately took the plausible deniability defense and waged the situation on a factor that is unprovable to the average viewer.
They then provide a list of Ivory stating his age multiple times on Twitter, so if I'm so sure that I didn't know he was 15, how would I have missed this? This is something I said in my original Reddit statement. He never once disclosed the fact that he was 15 at the time these exchanges commenced. He didn't include his age in his bio until he was 16, but I was not on Twitter between the 28th of December 2016 until the 29th of June 2017, as I was suspended.
However, this defense he used is immediately discredited because, as seen in the video of the archived Discord messages between both Ivory and Pyrocynical, Pyrocynical is seen linking Ivory's Twitter account in reference to his newest tweet, showing screenshots of him and Niall having played Dark Souls together, and this transpired on April the 5th, 2017. This not only proves that Pyrocynical was actively monitoring Ivory's newest tweets at the time, but it also proves how he was engaging with his account during the time period he claims he was simply not on Twitter.
I find it funny, like, they're acting like I'm hiding something, when ironically, that's exactly what they're doing here.
The idea that he himself is not hiding anything is extremely ironic, as he not only systematically purged all his Discord messages with Ivory to remove any incriminating evidence, but he also never highlighted once in his response video that he engaged with and saw Ivory's Twitter account during the exact same time where he claims that he couldn't have, as he was still suspended. Instead, he chose to openly lie to his fanbase, inferring that because he was suspended, he simply couldn't access Twitter itself, and ergo never saw Ivory's tweets at the time clearly stating his age to be 15. As further corroborated in the archived Discord DMs, Ivory is seen forwarding a Twitter account dedicated to posting cute pictures of foxes to Pyrocynical, in which he thanks Ivory for on March 9th, 2017. Again, Pyrocynical was free to access and view this account, and the idea he would not is simply misguided. On the 31st of March 2017, Ivory is seen linking a furry Twitter account stating that the thick art they create is so good, to which Pyrocynical was seen attesting that it was as well, implying that he has seen and engaged with this account before. These were all distinct instances of Pyrocynical being personally linked Twitter accounts, accessing Twitter, or engaging with Twitter accounts in the time frame he claims he couldn't have as he was suspended. In past videos Pyrocynical made during the same time period where he claims he wasn't on Twitter too, he referenced using the Twitter platform numerous times to get information or to find tweets of people he was looking for, once again contradicting his main defense. Here's a few notable instances.
My official Twitter, ChromeClan YT. The only tweet I could find that had any relevance. Guys, I go for a few days on Holy Day, so I can't upload. I'm sorry. Have a nice day, guys. That was his last tweet, so I can only make out that he went to heaven. I don't know why. If you go on YouTube's Twitter, their bio says, lol, watch this. I don't know why. I think they got hacked and they were just like, nah, it's funny. Leave it. Lol, watch this.
Most ironically, however, is when in 2018, Pyrocynical describes what it's like when you're suspended on Twitter. He attests himself that you're still able to see all of Twitter, giving an analogy that it's like being trapped in a glass cage. He only claims you are not able to engage with accounts in terms of messaging, liking, or retweeting. However, you can still get notifications and look at tweets yourself. And 2018 Twitter suspensions acted exactly like 2017 Twitter account suspensions.
I think easily the worst thing about being suspended is the fact that you're almost locked in a cage with a nice glass mirror so you can see all of Twitter. You can't tweet anything, you can't post anything, you can't interact with anyone, you can't even see your DMs anymore, but you're allowed to see your notifications. And you know what happens when you get suspended? You will see brainlets, just absolute brainlets, arguing over a post you made like 2 years ago, mate. And they are still going to this day.
So the entire plausible deniability defense Pyrocynical has used has completely fell flat, and has been proven to have been a lie. He is seen openly using Twitter during this time period, and even engaging with Ivory's account and actively monitoring it, despite having been suspended. And if Pyrocynical is willing to create such an elaborate lie such as this, while attempting to pin it as an objective fact, what else has he lied about?
Ivory himself did not disclose to me directly that he was 15.
Even worse for Niall were the numerous instances where Ivory highlighted that he was at school, far before Pyrocynical claimed to have known Ivory was 16 and on July the 5th, 2017, when he posted a Twitter link with his age being present in the bio. Ivory is specifically seen stating that he was attending classes and that he didn't want to be late for school, and even in another massive instance that his mother doesn't want to get him any presents until his school year is over. That is a distinct red flag, and it clearly indicates that Ivory never was alluding to being an adult in any instance. He is directly telling Niall here that he attends school classes and that his mother is restrictive on him getting presents, highlighting Ivory's dependence on his parents still and his lack of independence himself. You would have thought that if you, the viewer, were theoretically messaging someone that you believe to be above the age of 18, however you feign the excuse that you were never directly told about their age, just that you believe them to be an adult somehow, and that same person is telling you in numerous intervals that they're attending classes and are at school, and that their parents are not giving them any presents until the school year is over, highlighting their lack of independence, I'm guessing that you, the viewer, would probably then ask the same person how old they are, because those are some major red flags that you can't just magically ignore. However, Pyrocynical in this case actually engages with Ivory in these conversations, doesn't ask for his age, and doesn't even seem the slightest bit concerned or dissuaded from engaging with him. Pyrocynical is further seen referencing Ivory as a child and small boy in DMs, which is additionally concerning with all the past context that I've already highlighted. But by far the largest red flag presented was messages shown of Ivory and Pyrocynical discussing if they could meet up in the UK and go to a bar. The DMs are seen starting off with Ivory asking if he could come. followed up by him stating that he's considering asking. It is reasonable to insinuate that Pyrocynical would have asked in this instance if Ivory was going to ask his parents for permission, because there is no other applicable context which would have derived Ivory to have stated that he is considering asking. He's considering asking who? Ivory is then seen talking about what time it would be best to arrive, as well as the prices of the plane ticket, and is then seen stating right after that he would either need to sneak in or have a fake ID in order to get past the doorman. However, he quote-unquote looks the age regardless. Once again, it is abundantly clear that between the message where Ivory is seen asking what day he should come over, followed by the fake ID comment that he made, that in between these two sentences and messages, Niall would have probably asked a question that prompted Ivory to have then stated, "Yeah, I don't know except for sneaking in or making a fake ID." He most likely asked Ivory how he'd be able to drink with him at the bar, considering the fact that he was and wouldn't be allowed to drink, as the legal age for drinking in the UK is 18. Pyrocynical is seen barely referencing this screenshot in his original response video as to not poke holes into his entire defense, other than including a caption above the screenshot stating that it was Ivory discussing using a fake ID to get past doormen outside bars.
The only thing I can possibly think of is inviting him and a bunch of other people to an event in the UK.
And I want you to all explicitly focus on the fact that Niall stated bars in this caption, because in the UK you must be over the age of 18 to enter bars in the evenings for, meaning that if Ivory is explicitly seen telling Niall that he would have needed a fake ID but looked the age regardless, then this is a flat out admission that he was below the age of 18. My document even plays devil's advocate that somehow Niall could have possibly meant nightclubs, in which some nightclubs in the UK only allow people 21 years or over, but I highlight numerous inconsistencies and discrepancies that make that defense not plausible either. Pyrocynical is seen referencing the screenshot in his response video with the caption that Ivory was 16 at the time of discussing using a fake ID, however deliberately negates to mention the fact that these messages took place on May the 6th, 2017, and that is very important to highlight because it was a whole 2 months before he claimed to have known that Ivory was 16 on July the 5th, 2017. So in May, Ivory made it abundantly clear that he was. However, Pyrocynical was seen claiming that he only knew Ivory's age and that he was on July the 5th, 2017. Not only is he seen directly contradicting himself, but this is direct, irrefutable evidence that Pyrocynical must have known that Ivory was long before July the 5th, 2017. And this ultimately brings up a very important question. At what point was the earliest possible point that Pyrocynical could have known that Ivory was a because clearly he's lying in a drastic attempt to try and cover for his actions here. Past associates of Pyrocynical such as Saku, who featured in old videos of Pyrocynical's before, or even had direct contact with him on Discord, even attested that Pyrocynical knew Ivory's age being 15. This was also strengthened with other testimonies from people who were in the same community as Ivory at the time, attesting that Ivory's age was public knowledge and that everyone knew him to be 15. With all these factors collectively considered, the narrative starts to be formed that clearly Niall is not being honest whatsoever in regards to this situation and knowing Ivory's age. Pyrocynical in his response video as well even features Sive, who is well known for editing for PewDiePie. Now Sive featured in Pyrocynical's response video to defend him against claims that he had ulterior motives in inviting Ivory to come meet him in the UK and his friends at this event.
To say something was going to happen in a very public event with a load of people, even people Niall didn't even know and wasn't really close with, it's just false. Seriously. There's just no question about that.
What is very meticulously obfuscated, however, is Sive's questionable behavior around himself. You see, Sive was very active in the friend circle surrounding Pyrocynical in 2016, being very close to an associate of Pyrocynical's called Solid Shibe. Now, not only did Ivory himself attest that Solid Shibe was 15 in 2016, turning 16, but many other individuals are seen attesting themselves that Solid Shibe was a throughout 2016 and 2017. People had even posted screenshots of his face, and it was extremely discernible that he was clearly. In one instance, an ex-associate of Pyrocynical's named Trippy Fox, who also regularly interacted and was mutuals with Sive Morton too, had told Sive that Solid Shibe was 15 in direct Twitter replies. The idea that Sive did not see this reply is completely implausible. This tweet that Trippy Fox had made was on June the 29th, 2016, and that is important to take into account as Sive was seen throughout the remainder of 2016 and the months following, making crude and jokes directly to Solid Shibe, not only in Twitter replies, but also in direct messages. Sive Morton is seen in December 2016 making tweets stating, "No baby, you can only me," and referencing Solid Shibe's name stating, "Thomas, if I you no homo," followed by comments establishing that Solid Shibe should have read the fan fiction he had sent him recently, along with other comments of Sive stating he questions his every time he speaks with Solid Shibe. Matters get even more concerning when Sive was seen posting images publicly on his Twitter account of Solid Shibe's face edited on a and suggestive image of a girl with exposed with YouTuber Leafy here resting on them. All these instances transpired in December 2016, months after Trippy Fox had directly told him that Solid Shibe was 15. Even in the astronomically small chance that Sive did not see this direct reply from Trippy Fox on Twitter clearly telling him Solid Shibe's age, the idea that Solid Shibe's age was not public information or that it was hard for him to discern that he was clearly based on what he looks like is completely illogical. At the time of these jokes and images created by Sive in reference to Solid Shibe, Sive Morton was 21 turning 22. Solid Shibe himself had his birthday known to have been July the 11th, and would have most likely been at the time of these messages by Sive about 16. I'd like to preface the fact that not only is the age gap that morally egregious, but these jokes regardless are indefensible. Ava Chris Tyson was called out nonetheless for making jokes to fans with considerable age gaps being present between them. If Sive was somehow allowed, however, to have edited a face on a image and be seen making numerous jokes talking about wanting to with a then that would highlight a massive double standard present. It wasn't even as if these images were private knowledge either. These tweets still remain on Sive's Twitter account to this day. There is zero legitimate defense or excuse for the behavior exhibited by Sive in this situation. He was the adult, he was considerably older, and he should have known better. The company Pyrocynical keeps around him too clearly starts to paint a certain picture here.
Saying like, oh, it's just edgy jokes, people are blowing this out of proportion. What a bunch of nonsense. That's a load of hooey. That's dirty barnacles. That's ridiculous. Under no circumstances should an adult be communicating with a in any inappropriate manner whatsoever. Edgy jokes between an adult and they're still gross. That's not like the slam dunk defense that some people seem to think it is.
But anyway, now let's get back to when Pyrocynical attempted to feign a defense that his conversations to Ivory were so far detached from actual once again, because it was so unbelievably stupid that I wish to highlight it once more.
I didn't consider the age gap significant enough because what we were talking about and doing was so far removed from actual.
This manipulative belittlement is yet again further proven to be untrue due to the fact that just under 2 months after Ivory mentioned that he would need a fake ID in order to enter an 18+ venue on July the 4th, 2017, Ivory went into explicit detail about his life when he was with another girl, to which Pyrocynical did not shut down. Instead, Ivory is seen stating in response to a deleted message Pyrocynical made in reference to Ivory stating how he was intimidated by the girl during. So Pyrocynical was by definition directly engaging here. Ivory is then seen stating that he hasn't done anything in a year, meaning that he was 15 when it took place, and was then seen asking Pyrocynical if he himself did anything. Pyrocynical is then seen engaging and being complicit in the conversation, having prompted Ivory to respond with, "Yeah, I feel you on that." There is no excuse or defense. It is abundantly clear that Pyrocynical was replying to Ivory during these messages and engaged in the topic of conversation about a life. Ivory is then seen continuing to engage with topics about his fantasies during and how he could to the thought of the scenario that he has just presented. This wasn't roleplay. This was a clear-cut example of Niall and Ivory engaging in discussions to do with their life and in real life preferences. Another instance took place on the 30th of June 2017, only a few days earlier. The message exchange starts off with Ivory making a comment about the art that he just received from Pyro, with then Ivory stating that he still loves the image Niall had sent him earlier, going into suggestive detail about the positions of their two characters together. Pyrocynical then suggests something in a removed message of his that prompts Ivory to state that he personally is not into it. Judging by Ivory's responses and how he starts off his replies with the word it looks to be direct answers to questions that Pyrocynical is levying towards him and giving him in regards to his specific and fantasies. This such behavior was also exhibited in other allegations against Pyrocynical once again, where I brought up how he was seen apparently engaging with a old girl when he was 19 in late 2016, where he can be seen directly asking questions to the girl about what her are and her opinions on the content that he is providing her while he was an adult. Ivory's responses are even more concerning because in these archived messages, Ivory is seen directly going over his in real life fantasies, and despite Pyrocynical purging messages, it is still easy to discern that he was engaging in this topic of conversation. The topic of conversation then continues with Pyrocynical and Ivory discussing more about furry content, and Pyrocynical most likely sharing, of course, more material directly to Ivory, with him making a comment about the being present. Ivory is then seen forwarding material to Pyrocynical in response, and then Pyrocynical is seen sending even more. Ivory is seen making yet more comments about the material sent to him by Niall, adding more credibility to the idea that Pyrocynical had consistently sent him inappropriate content after knowing that he was a Then the situation gets even more degenerative, with what we can assume to be Pyrocynical and Ivory engaging in a roleplay, with Ivory discussing his fantasies of his persona engaging in with Pyrocynical's character. Pyrocynical again did not shut down these comments, nor did he disengage. In fact, he facilitated this topic of conversation by playing straight into a fantasies, not only about Ivory's to do with furry, but also what stimulates him in real life. This dynamic was never just about roleplay, it was far deeper and far more insidious. The instances where Ivory is seen replying with or at the start of the sentences, or the keyword spam, are indications of his direct reply to removed messages sent by Pyrocynical. Ivory was then seen continuing to describe in graphic detail about his fantasies of what he wants his persona character to do with Pyrocynical's, mentioning topics to do with deep attraction to and flatulence. Ivory then ends off the conversation by stating, "Nah, that's fine, man. I was just about to say sleep well, haha," in response to Pyrocynical most likely stating that he was going to bed now. And if you think it couldn't possibly get any worse, it very much does. Only one day after the fake ID statement on May the 7th, 2017, he was seen sharing artwork of his character, created when he was 16 years old, or possibly even younger. This is extremely alarming, considering the fact that Pyrocynical was told directly by Ivory himself that he was with the fake ID statement, but Pyrocynical simply just allowed him to post artwork of his persona, created while he was a and he did not request for it once to have been deleted. Ivory was then seen on May the 14th stating to Pyrocynical that he is getting the art of their two characters that they had discussed before, going into detail about it. By Ivory's sentences starting off with yeah and it is relatively easy to decipher the fact that Pyrocynical was complicit in the facilitation of these messages once again. Pyrocynical is then believed to have posted yet another example of furry content, to which Ivory replies with "ooh," once again describing the image in detail. Ivory then suggests an reference for artwork of their two characters, going into detail about the gas, positions, as well as the musk and sweat, presented by Ivory in these fantasies, and in these such message exchanges, Pyrocynical once again did not shut them down. He was completely complicit. On May the 19th, 5 days later, Ivory was even seen highlighting the fact that he was still waiting for art of his and Pyrocynical's character. All these individual situations paint a comprehensive picture of how deep this degeneracy went in regards to Pyrocynical's charged messages with Ivory. Not only did Niall admit himself in his own response video that he continued to engage with Ivory after knowing him to be 16.
In retrospect, I never should have continued the furry stuff with him once I learnt of his age.
But by seeing Ivory's responses in DMs, such as him stating, "ooh," that infers that he is replying in reference to Pyrocynical having directly sent him something to warrant that response. Now, another glaring red flag present in this situation was that when Ida, Pyrocynical's girlfriend, was seen victim-blaming Ivory in his Twitter DMs shortly after he came out regarding Niall's dynamic, not only was she seen defending the age gap and claiming that he was not innocent himself, but she was also seen stating, "You're not 14 anymore," clearly indicating that she knew his age the entire time. This was also further corroborated in Discord messages provided by Ivory on the 6th of April 2017, showing that he made his age known to Ida being 15, and expressing his concerns on if Niall would eventually change his mind and cut him off after regretting messaging him because of his age later on down the line. There was no inclination via these messages that Ivory was admitting to withholding his age from Pyrocynical. Proof has been provided in a document comprehensively proving that this account that Ivory messaged as well was in fact Ida. Ida's lack of interjection in these messages, both on Discord and in Twitter DMs, about Niall never knowing Ivory's age also serves to corroborate the narrative further. Now, Pyrocynical's main excuse was that he was never close to Ida in 2017, and they only dated in 2019, 2 years later, so Ida had no real incentive as to discuss Ivory's age to him.
If you look at the DMs Ivory provided himself for this document, you can see that he's confiding with Ida about age being a problem. Keep in mind as well, I was not in a relationship with Ida until about mid-2019. This document claims it as soon to be, but like, it's a whole 2 years before we actually start dating, and 2 whole years before this conversation took place. I mean, we both talked before, but we weren't close. She had no reason to confide with me with someone else's private information. So back when Ivory opened up to Ida about something private, there is no guarantee that she would have came and told me, despite the fact that this document and videos based off this document claim it as concrete, irrefutable proof.
Unless there's evidence that Pyro and Ida were a lot closer than he makes out in his video or whatever, that's a reasonable response to me.
And yet again, despite on the outside looking like a good rebuttal, this is another example of Pyrocynical lying and downplaying the situation. His defense that he was not close to Ida is immediately discredited by the fact that Ida herself is seen stating to Ivory on the 6th of April 2017 that she called with Pyrocynical every other day. Furthermore, the document I have made comprehensively shows in full the dynamic Ivory, Ida and Pyrocynical had. Ivory is seen telling Pyrocynical in DMs about the art Ida had created for him, or even that they were in calls together, and keep in mind Isa was another alias that Ida went by. Ivory was also seen talking to Pyrocynical on the 7th of April 2017 while he was still 15 about Niall getting a hotel, to which Pyrocynical was seen asking if Ida had told him that, to which Ivory states yeah, proving that Pyrocynical spoke to and had direct contact with Ida in private at the time and entrusted her with important information, and Ida spoke to Ivory about the information as well. There was a dynamic present between the three of them here. Ida was also seen on April the 23rd having made a live stream featuring both Pyrocynical and Ivory, and by analysing archived tweets made by Pyrocynical from 2016, he regularly interacted with Ida on Twitter, retweeting a lot of her art, and even pushing her to create thick content on May the 3rd, 2016, while she was 16 at the time, which is very important to address. Now, not only have we comprehensively proven that Ivory, Ida and Pyrocynical were significantly more close to each other than Niall claimed in his response video, with even Ivory asking Pyrocynical if he'd want to join a call with both him and Ida in a private server on November the 23rd, 2017, but now allow me to draw your attention to these Discord messages sent by Ivory on the 2nd of September 2017. Now, Ivory is seen having messaged Pyrocynical stating that Ida had uploaded thick art of his character on a popular furry website. Ivory is then seen stating, "I think it should be fine," followed up by him stating, "Oop, that's no bueno," followed by him posting a link to the artwork. What I really want you all to focus on is Ivory's messages where he is seen stating to Pyrocynical to just ask Ida to take the images down, and with Ivory stating, "Well, people make a lot of fan art, eh? I just say that if anyone brings it up." And this is pivotal to highlight, because judging by the nature of these conversations, it is clear that he had a problem with Ida making these images public. This had prompted Ivory to tell Pyrocynical to lie, and for him just to claim that it was fan art if it was ever brought up. This therefore means that these images were commissioned, or at bare minimum, specifically requested by Pyrocynical for Ida to have drawn. Pyrocynical evidently did not want these images to be public knowledge, and one could brush it off that he didn't want people to know about his but the problem goes so much deeper than that. When analysing when these images were uploaded to we were able to decipher that the art posted was the art that Ivory linked to Pyrocynical, due to comparing the descriptions of the images that identically match. The same account that posted this image too had posted 2 other images that were uploaded on the exact same day, with all the images having the artist tag of Secret Corgi, aka Ida, meaning it was made all by her. We were able to decipher that the account that uploaded these 3 images was Ida too, as Ivory states this himself to Pyrocynical. Now, it's very important to highlight that these images were uploaded on the 2nd of July 2017, meaning that Ida was 17 at the time of her uploading these suggestive furry art pieces, as Ida was born on March the 19th, 2000, meaning that the age gap between both Ida and Pyrocynical was 2 years, 10 months. It's not, but it's important to highlight this situation because it shows a concerning pattern of behavior here. Now, these 3 images, when reverse searched, can be found having originally been uploaded to the raw website on the 12th of August 2016, meaning that they were originally created by Ida when she was 16 years old and were possibly created long before they were uploaded to this website as well, and the tags specifically state that the artwork was of Pyrocynical's character. This matches with Pyrocynical's tweets he made during May 2016, a couple of months earlier, where he was seen consistently retweeting artwork Ida had created for him, to which he is seen complimenting her artwork and is then seen requesting her to make thick furry content. We are able to decipher this because only a few months later, following Pyrocynical's tweet on May the 3rd, 2016, tweeting the word thick to Ida, her artwork is magically seen being uploaded to websites depicting furry content, with Ivory telling Pyrocynical to lie, just claiming it was fan art, to try and give Pyrocynical a plausible deniability option, so he could feign ignorance over the creation of these images, which he most likely requested from someone who was a at the time, and started off being a fan of his content originally. On the 21st of September 2017, Ivory is even seen sharing information to Pyrocynical that Ida was creating content on Cool, which he was able to see and access. Keep in mind, Ivory was 16 at the time, Ida was 17, and Pyrocynical was 20. And by judging the artwork shown, it matches verbatim with the aforementioned furry images which were originally uploaded to, adding more credibility to the narrative that Ida made these images. I find it also important to highlight that on December the 15th, 2018, Pyrocynical had once again gone to Ivory asking for advice on how to use the plausible deniability card in reference to public images of his character, and Ivory is once again seen telling him just to claim it to be fan art so it doesn't directly implicate him, which is directly seen during the Ida situation too, as we've mentioned before. The pattern of Pyrocynical inappropriately engaging with fans of his, many of whom were and made fan art for him in which he liked, with him then requesting them to create art for him while he was an adult, is a common occurrence which has been touched up upon in my document. I'm sure there are many more individuals who Pyrocynical has done this to as well, other than his eventual girlfriend, and it is extremely confusing how people can sit back and defend this repeated pattern of pushing his onto and then have them conform to creating suggestive content for him. He abuses his platform as a content creator and got to inappropriately engage with his and fantasies. In the case of Ida, the age gap was not inherently, but for many other alleged, that same defense cannot be said.
Several of our conversations were leaked online by Ivory. Here's one of the more damning ones.
I'd love for my Sona to be at his fat, sweaty, while rubbing his from behind, and then just having him all over my Sona's face. That would be so nice. Or if mine was just underneath him, getting underneath his huge, and your Sona could be non-stop, as if mine like, huh?
Pyrocynical's inclusion of a segment in his video where his friend, Colossal is Crazy, proceeds to read one of these charged messages sent by Ivory in an over-the-top comedic voice is deliberately done to play down the severity of the situation and to try and trivialize the dynamic to make it seem as just one large joke. His viewers then proceeded to see the instances such as this and find humor in it, essentially taking the fangs out of these allegations. His fanbase will now see less of a problem with how and fundamentally disgusting this actually is, and simply just deduce it as some furry roleplay. Instead of Pyrocynical having been an adult and messaging an fan of his by engaging with their fantasies, role-playing with them, sending them, and engaging in topics to do with their life. No other YouTuber has managed to get away as unscathed as Pyrocynical has for engaging with an fan of theirs significantly younger than themselves, and this situation has been degraded to the idea that Pyrocynical admitted his in front of everyone to debunk allegations of him being a when he hasn't actually debunked anything or any critical points whatsoever. He's only lied and tried to take the plausible deniability route. Pyrocynical took advantage of the circumstantial evidence provided by Turkey Tom's document and feigned the plausible deniability excuse. He attempts to use wordplay manipulation, affirming that no were ever sent and that he had no real interest in Ivory, as if that fundamentally changes anything at all or makes him innocent.
This document makes insane assumptions based on limited and broken evidence. It's not hard to dismantle it, it's just annoying that I have to be the one to do it.
Pyrocynical made it known in his response video that he was annoyed that he had to address the situation head on himself, inferring that he would have preferred his own fanbase to do the defending on his own behalf. This rubbed me the wrong way because it is your own responsibility as a content creator to address your own allegations head on yourself, and to not hide behind your fanbase in hopes that they will harass into silence or proliferate misinformation unchallenged to try and muddy the waters of the situation. And the evidence is all out there of Pyrocynical's fanbase comprehensively brushing off stories, claiming them to be fake or lying about them having clout incentives or ulterior motives, and this all directly falls into Pyrocynical's benefit.
Ivory himself even struggles to explain how what I did was
how were you? Because you don't need to be for this to be wrong. I mean, is it really fair that you use the word? And if that's true, if you feel that's true, where was this going?
See, I'm not like, I don't know. I was in a call with my friend when I like typed it out, and I typed like, I remember I typed that and asked like, is that okay?
Because it reads more like a YouTube like thumbnail. Do you honestly believe? Did you not understand the definition of the word?
I feel like it was like forcing or like manipulating it into a like situation.
Okay.
This specific segment of Tommy C's interview with Ivory, where he was evidently stressed and had later described himself to be shaking during the instance where he had to record the disgusting situation on a video which was going to be viewed by tens of thousands of people, which ultimately clouded his judgment and line of thinking, as well as Pyrocynical utilizing weaknesses in Turkey Tom's original document, gave him a clear path to push the narrative to his viewer base that the allegations were categorically false, when if you actually look deeper in the chat logs and the proof provided, you can start to clearly see and decipher how egregious it actually really was. And Pyrocynical's utilization of inconsistencies to wiggle his way out of situations is best seen with the 14-year-old French girl allegations. Now, moving away from the situations pertaining to Ida and Ivory, I wish to highlight one of the largest lies surrounding Pyrocynical that has lasted for almost 8 years, and that is the French girl situation. Despite a video being released by Toastify or Keemstar's interview with the girl herself, still to this day people believe that the French girl situation was a lie meticulously created by Keemstar so he could just spite Pyrocynical. However, the slim minority who come to the understanding that she did exist will also use and utilize insane mental gymnastics to either claim that they were not in a proper relationship, try to claim that the dynamic was not inappropriate, or will attempt to justify the age gap, or use the ancient reality situation to deflect away from what Pyrocynical did himself. Now, the French girl, also known as Luan, currently goes by the tag Ectofrog on Twitter, and she is open about the situation, confirming to users in 2021 that she had dated Pyrocynical in 2015 when she would have been and Pyrocynical would have been 18. Now, the exact time period that they dated is unclear, but by examining old tweets made at the time, Pyrocynical was seen having interacted with Lou actively throughout January 2016. This was then followed by users at the time referencing Luan as Pyrocynical's ex-girlfriend as early as February the 29th, 2016. By looking at tweets made by Dolan Dark and Max Mofo 2, both content creators who were close with and associated with Pyrocynical even still to this day, you can clearly see that both of them engaged with Luan in late 2015 throughout October. Now, Luan is 23 turning 24 this year and is open about her date of birth being July the 14th, meaning that the age gap between her and Pyrocynical would have been 4 years 2 months. And as you can see, Luan under her Twitter account Ectofrog is seen making a reply under both Anything for Views and 8-Bit Ryan's old tweets, to which they're both seen referencing Luan's old account named Dumoria67, and she openly admits that she ran this account too, proving it to be her. Now, Luan's age was public knowledge under her Demoria67 alias, with someone in early 2015 mentioning that she was 13 years of age. And then after her birthday, many individuals and even her mutuals are seen referencing her age as 14, meaning that her age was public knowledge. The idea that Luan did not make her date of birth known either is factually untrue, as by looking at archives of her Twitter account, you can clearly see she had it present in her bio, and she would make tweets referencing her birthday to which her mutuals are seen replying to, even including the popular Five Nights at Freddy's YouTuber named Dorko. At the time, a popular montage parody YouTuber named MLG Vagabonds was even seen messaging his ex-girlfriend who he engaged with when she was allegedly and he was 19, mentioning how, quote-unquote, a lot of people know about us, and Pyrocynical did the same thing I did with you, except she was 14. So this therefore adds more credibility to the point that Luan was publicly known by many individuals at the time to have been 14 in 2015 and early 2016. Now, Vagabonds was one of 3 members who were a part of a Skype group chat where they were compiling evidence against Pyrocynical, and this is due to the fact that a friend of Luan's had logged into her account and supplied them Twitter messages proving that they were in fact in a relationship. Now, the members of the Skype chat decided to forward this information to Keemstar, with Keemstar reaching out to Pyrocynical on March the 22nd, 2016, stating that he was just contacted with information that he was dating an alleged year-old girl, to which Pyrocynical completely denied, according to Keemstar himself, and the situation would go relatively silent. Now, the French girl situation originally took off after April 9th, 2016, when Pyrocynical had made a video criticizing Keemstar for his video covering the Tobuscus allegations, stating that he should have made a clearer disclaimer to his fanbase to not take the allegations at face value due to the monolithic amount of hate that ended up transpiring on Tobuscus' YouTube channel shortly after Keemstar's video dropped on Drama Alert. Now, in response, Keemstar is seen responding aggressively to Pyrocynical, making a barrage of Twitter videos bashing Pyro and famously threatening to release the files on top of files he had against Niall in regards to the information he received about him dating an girl.
If you're gonna swing at me, dude. Let me know, because I got files on top of files to swing back at.
In response, Pyrocynical then seized on the opportunity to make a video titled My Experience with Keemstar, posted on June 9th, 2016, where he proceeded to lie to his audience and claim that the situation was fabricated and complete bullshit.
And if that wasn't bad enough, Keem is now trying to spread even more, saying that I'm dating girls and saying outright on stream that I'm a
Pyro was trying to hook up with a 13-year-old girl from France, alright? That he was technically like a or a weirdo or something, right?
This story is total. I know exactly the 3 individuals who told Keem and even got in a Skype group chat with him.
Now, what is more important to highlight was the fact that Pyrocynical took advantage of the fact that Keemstar was seen as an unreliable narrator at the time and homed in on Keemstar being inconsistent with the age of the girl, to then try and manipulate his audience and lie, heavily pushing forth the narrative that she did not exist. Pyrocynical did this meticulously and was able to paint the story as untrue to over 6 million people by focusing on Keemstar's discrepancy of her age.
14-year-old French girl and
Now, if any of you didn't notice that, he just deliberately lowered the age. Now, originally, this alleged girl was 15, and now Keemstar has lowered the age to 14, probably to make it sound even more impacting and incriminating. And guess what? Later on stream, he lowered the age again to say the girl was now 13, and on top of that, basically insinuating that I was a
Pyro was trying to hook up with a 13-year-old girl from France, alright? That he was technically like a or a weirdo or something, right?
So this man has lied about the age of this girl on 2 separate occasions, and knowing Keemstar, this girl will probably be an embryo by next week.
This was extremely malicious on Pyrocynical's part, and still to this day, people are under the belief that the girl never existed and it was just one big malicious lie created by Keemstar, who was attempting to get back at Pyrocynical in the most vindictive way possible. However, she did exist, and Keemstar 2 days later made a tweet showing Twitter messages between both Pyrocynical and Luan from March the 10th, 2016. In these messages, Pyrocynical is seen confirming that they did in fact have a relationship, and he is seen stating himself that he would be happy to wait for her to hit 16 before engaging in a proper relationship with her, which is a glaring red flag. Pyrocynical was then seen on Twitter replying to Keemstar, stating that he sees no problem in waiting for her to have reached the age of consent, therefore indirectly admitting the images were real and not explicitly denying them. He was then seen deflecting the situation, claiming that Keemstar still lied about her age on 2 separate occasions. Pyrocynical therefore by definition admitted on his own volition that he had the intent to wait for an girl to reach the legal age of consent before having a relationship with them. That is inherently, especially when considering the already drastic age gap dynamic between them and the maturity difference in play, but we will touch more on that later. Now, Pyrocynical was seen making a damage control statement on his Reddit to try and get ahead of the situation. Video proof is also provided proving the legitimacy of the post and how Pyrocynical's actual Reddit account was seen having made this statement. Now, Pyrocynical uploaded this statement to his subreddit so it would not reach the greater community where it would be inevitably picked apart. He uploaded it to his subreddit because he knew it contained his most ardent supporters and they would defend him regardless, as the Reddit served as an echo chamber for him. In his Reddit post, Pyrocynical admits the Twitter messages were real, by mentioning himself that Keemstar released Twitter messages between him and this girl. Keep in mind, he did not deny the veracity or authenticity of the messages whatsoever. However, Pyrocynical was seen stating he did not date the girl under any circumstances and claimed that she was years old at the time, while he himself would have been 18. Both of these claims made by Pyrocynical are complete lies, but let's tackle the first claim. Pyrocynical states that he did not date the girl whatsoever, and he only used the term relationship once in messages with her in reference to being supportive of her during tough times, and this is complete bullshit. Now, by observing the messages between Pyrocynical and Luan, it shows Pyrocynical having admitted himself verbatim that he quote-unquote ended the relationship with them. He is then seen following up by affirming that the reason for him leaving the relationship wasn't because he was scared about being seen as a to which Luan replies with the fact that it was, following up by stating that he did leave the relationship to keep his channel safe because in actuality he didn't wish to be seen as a Judging by what Lu says herself in these messages, it is clear that Pyrocynical was scared about the repercussions he would receive for engaging in a relationship with such a large age gap and power dynamic, and knew that it was inherently attempting to cut the relationship off to save himself without taking any accountability for it whatsoever. In another message yet again, Pyrocynical is seen stating that they only messaged for 2 weeks, so it wasn't a lifetime relationship anyways. This once again completely contradicts Pyrocynical's entire narrative where he claimed he only used the term relationship once, because here he is seen once again admitting directly to Luan in DMs that they had dated and were in a relationship for a period of 2 weeks. Now, in 2020, Keemstar had conducted an interview with the French girl being Luan shortly after the situation between Pyrocynical and Ivory had died down. In this interview, Luan combats many of Pyrocynical's lies he made in his initial Reddit statement, and she starts off by highlighting that Pyrocynical and her met up in 2015 and had originally got in contact with one another when Pyrocynical had followed her after she created fan art for him, because according to Luan, Pyrocynical was her favourite YouTuber currently at the time.
So I met Pyro back in 2015 when I was 14 years old and he was 18 years old. For him and his group of friends, so all these YouTubers in the community he was in, I drew him a lot because, well, he was my favorite of them all. To show me his support, he followed me, and so later on I thanked him and talked to him in DMs, and that's how we became friends.
So you guys, you know, became friends. You were making art for him. Were you making, like, I think you told me off air that you were making like his avatars and
Yeah, the Fox one.
Yeah.
This avatar. Yep.
And notice what Luan had said too. She states herself that she was while Pyrocynical was 18. This directly contradicts Pyrocynical's claims in his initial Reddit post response, where he states that Luan was 15 during the time of them speaking together. We know Pyrocynical to have lied about the age of Luan regardless, due to the fact that Luan made her date of birth known and her age was public knowledge regardless, meaning that the age gap between both Pyrocynical and Lu was 4 years 2 months. Now, in reference to when they had officially started dating, Luan claims it happened not long after they originally started to speak with one another, describing the situation as young love and claiming that they even with one another.
this develops into a romantic relationship. When did that take place?
Well, not very long after. I guess we'll have known each other for like a few months before this happened. In DMs, we did start maybe a little bit saying that, well, we like each other's personalities and he appreciates what I do for him and I appreciate his company. So it was quite, you know, young love, like where you have a crush.
Right.
Yeah.
Were you, you know, he said that, like, you know, he never dated you, like that you weren't his girlfriend. But were you boyfriend and girlfriend?
Yeah, we were.
In the sense of like e-dating, right? Because you never met each other in real life, but you were e-dating online.
Exactly.
So not only does Luan state that the age gap was indeed 4 years, but she also attested that her and Niall were in an online relationship where apparently, according to her, they were with one another, directly contradicting Pyrocynical's initial Reddit statement where he is seen vehemently denying ever being in a relationship with this girl. Luan is seen further attesting that she was in an interview too, even claiming that Pyrocynical knew her date of birth, including what year she was born in, being 2001, and she has no idea why Pyrocynical lied to try and cover up her actual age, other than to make the age gap dynamic seem less concerning.
So at the time you were Pyro was 18, correct?
Yep.
And when you were dating and considered boyfriend and girlfriend, and it was a short period of time, how long were you dating?
Only about 2 weeks.
2 weeks. So in the course of this 2 weeks, again, just for the internet's sake, what were the ages?
Still 18.
In his response, he said that you were 15 years old and he was 18. Why did he say that you were 15?
I have no idea. Maybe to make it less shocking? Maybe to make the age gap smaller by a year, because maybe people thought it would be not nicer, but less wrong because...
But what if Pyrocynical responds to this and says, well, she lied about her age. She told me that she was older.
He knew I was born in 2001, which would have made me 14 years old when it was 2015.
Did he know the month you were born? I'm sorry, this is like, but we have to know this stuff because, if there's any little hole of like, plausible deniability, he's going to take it, right?
Well, we surely told each other's birthdays. I mean, it's what you do when you get to know someone. So he probably knew I was born in July.
Pyrocynical was seen in his Reddit post stating that the comment he made where he said he would be happy to wait for her to hit 16 inferred that nothing transpired between them because he was happy to wait for her to reach the age of consent if they were to have ever engaged in a proper relationship. And this defense is not sufficient at all. Not only does it underline and highlight Pyrocynical's intent to wait for a 15-year-old girl to turn 16 before engaging with her in a proper relationship when he would have been 20, but it is clearly indicative of... When highlighting Pyrocynical's position, he was a massively popular content creator, and Luann had become a massive fan of his, by creating fan art and even attesting herself in an interview that he was her favourite creator.
I was a fan artist for him and his group of friends, so all these YouTubers in the community he was in. I drew him a lot because, well, he was my favourite of them all.
Pyrocynical then engages in a romantic relationship with this girl shortly after, to which she claims it to be young love and that Pyrocynical was vicious.
In DMs, we did start maybe a little bit saying that, well, we like each other's personalities and he appreciates what I do for him and I appreciate his company. So it was quite, young love, like where you have a crush.
Now, despite the disparaging age gap dynamic between them, Pyrocynical was clearly not dissuaded by her age, and for anyone who would defend an age gap of 18 and a 15-year-old girl does not have the mental cognitivity present to understand the possible ramifications of engaging in a relationship with significantly older individuals, and that in turn makes them susceptible to forms of manipulation, and vulnerable to either intentional or even unintentional forms of or control exerted from the other party upon them. 14-year-olds are in a completely different spectrum of life compared to 18-year-olds who are just coming out of puberty and are adults legally culpable for their own actions, and a difference in maturity and mannerisms form a massive maturity difference and dynamic. The idea that an 18-year-old could date as long as it's platonic and only romantically driven does a disservice and attempts to discredit how the age gap dynamic is regardless, and that isn't even considering the fact that this year-old was a massive fan of Pyrocynical's at the time, establishing a blatant power dynamic in play here too. The age gap, regardless, would be looked down upon by the majority of people in society and in the court of public opinion. The fact that Pyrocynical would see no problem with engaging in a romantic relationship with a fan of his who is considerably younger, and then actively wait for her to turn the legal age of consent in this country before engaging in a relationship with her while he would have been 20 and she would have been 16, contains all the hallmarks for behavior, as he's conditioning them to accept a possible future relationship once they turn legal. By expressing willingness to wait as well, Pyrocynical was normalizing the idea of a relationship with her while she was still very much under, which is manipulative. The fact that, according to Luann, Pyrocynical ended the relationship out of fears of being seen as a highlight the fact that he wanted to keep this as secretive as possible and knew how unethical and immoral the relationship was, regardless of if it only lasted 2 weeks or was not. He only ended the relationship, according to Luann, to protect his own image and reputation. He acknowledges that the age gap dynamic was flagrantly disgusting and could be viewed as, but he continued nonetheless until people started looking into it. Only then did he cut her off.
He ends up in these DM conversations breaking it off with you, right?
Yeah.
And in the conversation, it's very clear that you're accusing him of breaking up with you because, for fame, and he doesn't want it to hurt his YouTube channel, and he doesn't want to come across looking like a right? Was that the scenario? Why did you guys break up?
Well, when all these allegations came up, when either my friends or his friends wanted to make it all public, he came up to me saying that this won't work, that this will just make him seem like a very bad person, and he decided to tell me that we should just end everything.
Luan also attested that the relationship was not, and instead they only discussed topics to do with video games and fan art, and they shared selfies with one another. Luan affirmed that there was most likely an instance where she sent a picture of her face to Pyrocynical, and he claimed that she looked cute, and there were occasional instances where they complimented each other.
What was the relationship then?
Really, it was just like the most simple relationship you could ever imagine. I guess him and I had interest into games and what he was doing, as well as fan arts and all these things. We just got along well with our personalities as well. It was really simple. There was no
was there any like, you're cute, like I like you're pretty, do I like the way you look, like is there this type of stuff? Is that what we're talking about?
Probably, yeah. It is. I must have sent him like pictures of me, and I know he sent me a selfie once when he was with his dog, I think, and I did think he was cute.
Yeah.
And I think I made an exception for him and did show myself, and he probably highly said I was pretty.
Once again, this affirms the idea that it was originally an emotional and romantic relationship between the two parties, to which Pyrocynical was then seen actively highlighting his motives on them waiting for her to reach the age of consent, showing his intent on them wanting to have a relationship with her later on down the line. The idea made by anyone that he was not directly inferring this is completely illogical. He stated verbatim in his tweet response to Keemstar that he had no problem in waiting for her to reach the legal age of consent, and again in his Reddit response, he is seen stating that it was in reference to the possible scenario of them engaging in a proper relationship. It is evident what the connotations were. The fact that according to Luan, Pyrocynical dated her at and according to her most likely saw selfies of her face calling her cute is yet again another massive red flag which many people have simply just omitted. The fact that no one has highlighted the problem of a popular YouTuber who is an adult reaching out to an fan of theirs, then engaging in a close romantic and emotional relationship with them while highlighting their willingness to wait for them to become legal to then engage with them in the future is insane. It literally matches all the hallmarks for. And the fact that anyone would defend an age gap dynamic as bad and as egregious as this is one thing, but for someone to not see the red flags present in a situation like this or to even defend it is seriously illogical. Now, the main situation people bring up to try and deflect away from the massive red flag present in regards to Pyrocynical having dated this French girl was the fact that another YouTuber, Ancient Reality, had dated Luan shortly after they had broken up with Pyro, with tweets showing that they were both publicly engaging with one another in February of 2016. At this time, Ancient Reality was 23, Luan was and the relationship lasted for slightly over a year and was absolutely horrible. Ancient Reality had engaged with the girl in real life, despite the disparaging age gap dynamic between them, and had used consistent emotional techniques, such as threatening, to keep Luan close to him. He was controlling and extremely. The actions committed by Ancient Reality, however, do not now magically nullify Pyrocynical's malicious intentions regardless. What Ancient Reality did was objectively and categorically repulsive. However, many users attempt to bring up the situation to try and shut down any justified criticisms towards Niall in regards to the French girl, and that is simply misplaced. Although Luan attested that the real problem was Ancient Reality, and she only had positive things to say about Niall, denying that he was a or that does not, under any circumstances, discredit Pyrocynical's intentions to wish to wait for her to reach the age of consent before engaging with her, when she would have been 16 and he would have been 20, and it certainly does not nullify Pyrocynical's attempt to lie to his own audience on numerous occasions, at first attempting to spin the story as a complete lie made by Keemstar, only to then be seen on his Reddit slowly conceding to more and more of the story, but still affirming that they never dated and lying that she was older. Pyrocynical is by definition a compulsive liar. He will lie consistently, only seen conceding to more of the situation when his defense and story is challenged with more evidence and proof, with more and more attention being brought onto it.
I recall the dynamic here being Pyrocynical, like admitting to a little bit or conceding to a little bit, but then it took more information coming out for him to then concede to a bit more. And I can't remember the exact details of it, but it was this dynamic where it felt like he wasn't taking like accountability for something unless it was revealed very publicly.
Another important point to address was in Pyrocynical's Reddit response. He is specifically seen stating that he originally came across the Skype group digging for information on him after one user had their ex-girlfriend see them being initially contacted by Keemstar on their stream. This ex-girlfriend then reached out to Niall to give him the information, and this is something very important that I wish to highlight. Pyrocynical is then seen specifically stating that, quote-unquote, later I was sent information of this individual who was present in the Skype chat, allegedly meeting with the girl when she was at the time and with her when he was 19. I confronted him about this and said how even though I have the information that he had, I won't make it public. Pyrocynical then follows up by specifying how he had medical proof that the girl was active in January 2015, which was the time that they were both in a relationship together. Pyrocynical is then seen stating that he chose not to name the individual involved on his own volition and how he doesn't want the comments to turn into a guessing game of who done it. So Pyrocynical knew exactly who the popular creator was who had with a while he was an adult, and even had proof and medical reports to add credibility towards the allegations, yet stated himself that he did not wish to make the information public and actively chose not to name the individual involved. The problem in this, of course, being that the unnamed individual Pyrocynical was referring to was a once popular montage parody channel named MLG Vagabonds, who went on to essentially get away with a thanks to Niall not specifying his name and alias. Vagabond shortly after was seen consistently streaming for months preceding the situation, continuing to get money and donations from fans, and eventually even making the popular meme channel named Meme Corp, garnering over 1 million subscribers and millions upon millions of views, completely getting away with the situation unscathed. Pyrocynical had the evidence, he had the platform to call him out, and he even shared the medical reports of the girl. He actively chose on his own volition to not name the YouTuber who her. Now let's circle back to Toastify's video covering Ancient Reality, The French Girl, and Pyrocynical, which came out on July the 8th, 2023. In response, Colossal is Crazy was seen stating on Twitter that he and Pyrocynical would be addressing the allegations on the To Be Honest podcast, affirming as well that Pyrocynical never knew the actual age of Ancient Reality, and just assumed he was the same age as Luan, being 14 or 15, once again feigning the plausible deniability excuse. However, in Toastify's video interviewing Luan, she did attest that Pyrocynical apparently knew the age gap present between her and Ancient Reality, meaning that Pyrocynical was apparently aware of the 9-year age gap between them, and that she was dating a 23-year-old man at the age of, and yet he apparently said nothing and did nothing to stop the relationship. Pyrocynical's knowledge of the relationship was also corroborated by the fact that he was seen referencing Mick, which is Ancient Reality's name, to Luan in private Twitter messages in March of 2016. However, Luan has been on record in the past stating that Pyrocynical nor his friends knew about the specific that she endured from Ancient Reality.
Okay, so did he try to help you in any way?
No, I think he might have just wanted to completely not get related to anything of this.
Alright, so he knew it was going on, but he didn't want to get involved.
Yeah, but like I said, he definitely didn't know what was going on, awfully, in the back.
So he didn't know about these stuff?
No, he didn't know about it.
Toastify shortly after had made a YouTube community post casting doubt on the plausible deniability excuse that Pyrocynical had levied through Colossal is Crazy, who acted as his proxy. He highlighted how Snipers, once a close friend of Pyrocynical, had stated that Mick was 22 and was taken of a 14-year-old girl, to which he told directly to Keemstar. This can clearly be seen in a Reddit reply he made, and while he did not directly state that it was Ancient Reality, it was very easy to know who he was referring to. Toastify also highlighted how Lou attested herself that Pyrocynical knew of the actual age gap, followed by even highlighting that in videos created by Ancient Reality, it was easily discernible that he did not appear 15 in any of the instances, and that he clearly appeared to be an adult. Toastify even established a notorious video Ancient Reality had uploaded to the and even on other social media platforms, where he was seen and onto a Minions toy in which went around the community in mid-2015, with many people seen referencing it. If Pyrocynical had actually believed Mick, aka Ancient Reality, to have been the same age as the French girl, so 14 or 15 at this time, then how was he not concerned whatsoever about Ancient Reality uploading possible illicit material of himself when he was a and spreading it across the community and internet to other individuals? It would literally be a crime to disseminate this kind of content if he was a... Even worse regarding all of this was that if Pyrocynical and others believed Ancient Reality to have actually been 14 or 15 at this time, then why did Pyrocynical not have a problem with his close associate Dolan Dark, who was 18 in 2015, making jokes to ancient reality based off of this video, inferring directly that he knew what happened in the video and he watched it. With all these variables collectively considered, it is extremely obvious that many things are not adding up, and Pyrocynical just wished to take another plausible deniability route to negate culpability once again. Either Pyrocynical lied through Colossal is Crazy to cover for the fact that he knew that ancient reality, his close friend and adult, was dating the same that he dated before, and he did nothing to stop the relationship with a 9-year age gap being present, or Pyrocynical is telling the truth and just self-reported that a close friend of his, Dolan Dark, had just watched what he personally believed to be content while he was an adult, and Pyrocynical did nothing to stop him. In both these scenarios, Pyrocynical shows a blatant lack of action. Very conveniently as well is the fact that despite Colossal openly stating that the French girl situation would be addressed by Pyrocynical, this never actually came into fruition. They instead continued making videos on the To Be Honest podcast channel, but they selectively ignored the topic and never once addressed it, with many users being seen replying asking for where the response was, but this all fell on deaf ears. This was all until the last baited podcast video addressing the I'm Alex situation, hosted by Keemstar, Colossal is Crazy, and Tommy C. Essentially, in this video, Keemstar brings up the French girl situation directly to Colossal and took him off guard. In response, Colossal is Crazy is seen becoming confrontational and attempts to drastically downplay the dynamic between both Pyrocynical, who was 18, and Luan, who was getting the age gap between them incorrect initially, and belittling the situation by claiming it to have been a nothing burger, selectively omitting Pyrocynical's intentions to wish to wait for her to become the legal age of consent.
Was he or was he not in a relationship with a girl that was, I believe it came out to be at the time?
He was in an E-relationship. Nothing ever happened. Nothing ever occurred.
With an E relationship with a year-old when he was what?
I don't think she's 14.
19?
No.
No, she was. I interviewed her. We got the correct age.
He was 17.
Yeah, that's right. Because he made
No,
it
he
early.
wasn't. No,
He was 17.
No, he wasn't.
Keemstar is always right, guys.
Not at that time.
Yes, he was.
Not at that time. He wasn't 17
Nothing
at that
ever
time.
happened. No exchanged. Just a big nothing burger.
Meanwhile,
Meanwhile,
you guys can look
Keemstar
it
is
up.
dating
Go
someone
get the-
20
go
years
to
younger
Google.
than him.
In the following two segments I wish to show as well, Colossal is seen conceding that the age gap was instead 4 years, not 3 years, but is once again attempting to justify an 18 and year-old online dating by using the high school dynamic excuse and brushing off the fact that Pyrocynical lied numerous times about it ever happening by once again stating that the situation was a nothing burger to begin with.
But I do find it ironic that you would take offense.
Sound like you were.
No, I'm not calling you. I do find it ironic, however, that you would call someone like Pyrocynical for an E-relationship with a 3-year age gap or 4-year age gap. I don't know.
Go Google it. Go Google the ages, people. Go Google the ages.
I don't know.
Find out for
I get
yourself.
confused
Don't
because you
listen.
got him wrong like 8 times.
Hey, in fairness, the clown, we didn't figure out that girl was 14 until like 2 years ago. We did like most people thought we couldn't prove she even existed.
Yeah. What was she accusing him of? Nothing. She had nice things to say. Where was the video? Where's the story? There's nothing.
She did have nice things to say.
You had Jack. You couldn't make it about Pyrocynical, but you were desperately trying to.
The ages, clown. The ages. The ages.
Who gives a I mean, who gives a
story.
Nothing happened. They E-dated while they were both teenagers. Who gives a
lied. Clown, your friend, your buddy came out and lied multiple times on Reddit about that scenario, and you're going to defend him?
I am going to defend him because there was nothing. It's a big nothing burger.
He lied.
I will
but
say
he
this.
lied.
I will say this.
Oh, so
clown.
you're not going to... You're going to defend him and his lies, clown?
And didn't
Really?
do his share of manipulation to protect himself.
Thank you.
But I have to also agree with clown.
lied through his teeth.
I don't deny that, but there was nothing there. I mean, when the truth is out, you say he lied. Okay, truth comes out. Well, there's nothing there. It's a nothing burger. Absolutely
nothing there other than the fact that the ages and the E relationship, nothing there though.
High school.
He was high school age.
Not just the high school thing, not just high school drama, because it was all on the internet. They never even met in person.
Why should you talk?
He didn't even know what she looked like, as far
You
as
don't
I
let
know.
me talk.
Many people believed Pyrocynical's response as Keemstar had an already tainted credibility at the time, and was seen as an inconsistent and unreliable narrator of allegations, as he had consistently changed the ages of the French girl, and didn't develop a cohesive video on the subject, clearly illustrating to viewers that she was a real individual. Ultimately, it was easier for Pyrocynical to gain an upper hand in this situation because Keemstar at the time was making claims which were seen as ultimately baseless and out of emotion and vitriol. Keemstar was also seen as being unable to take criticism. That is why still to this day, people consistently cast doubt on the veracity of this situation, despite it being completely true. I find it insane the double standard present on the internet. Pyrocynical fans will attempt to claim that anyone who brings these allegations up are simply reviving old drama, as if that invalidates any of Pyrocynical's actions whatsoever. Pyrocynical was an adult who abused the platform and position he had to consistently send furry to a fan of his who was 4 years younger than him, and engaged in based discussions with them in 2016 all the way to 2018, and he actively got away with it. However, other content creators such as Ava Chris Tyson or Dr. Disrespect, who were also seen inappropriately engaging with fans of theirs spanning from 2017 and 2018, were justifiably completely ostracized from their platforms and were called out, regardless of how many years ago their incidents actually were. The double standard is glaring, and it works like a charm for Pyrocynical because his fans will consistently defend him and excuse his behavior with insane mental gymnastics, no matter how reprehensible they were. People specifically treat Pyrocynical different because they want to believe that he is innocent, not because he actually is. And this all gets even worse when analyzing another glaring red flag present in Pyrocynical's response video, where he attempts to belittle and minimize a situation to do with a 15-year-old girl who he pushed to create furry content for him when he was 19 in 2016. Essentially, an artist on Instagram known as Spoopy Scary Aliens was a large fan of Pyrocynical's and had created fan art for him, including an image of Pyrocynical's character cuddling a body pillow. As a result, Pyrocynical liked the art and privately messaged them on Twitter stating, "Why is your pic me with a body pillow?" and that it was not thick enough. In another instance, Pyrocynical was then seen asking the girl how old she was, to which she stated that she was 15. This was then followed by the year-old being pressed to create the thick furry content regardless, despite Pyrocynical knowing her age, and she even stated to a friend verbatim that Niall demanded her to do it. One look at her Instagram page at the time, and she openly shows that she attended school, and it was incredibly easy to discern the fact that she was and the age gap present between this girl and Pyrocynical was about 3 years, 7 to 8 months. This is due to the girl having stated that she was almost 20 as of mid-December 2020. This either meant that she turned 20 in December 2020 or January 2021. Pyrocynical, as we discussed earlier, was born on May the 14th, 1997, making him at the time of him pushing a 15-year-old to create art for him 19. He was 19 years old when this transpired in 2016.
On a side note, unrelated to this doc, I've actually seen screenshots circulating around of someone who drew like fan art of my Fox character back in 2016. I then apparently replied to them like jokingly saying not thick enough and then asking for their age, and they said 15. So when people saw this, they instantly drew parallels to the allegation. I asked them for a thick version and they drew this, which isn't even really that different from previous things they drew before even getting into contact with me.
In this allegation, Pyrocynical attempts to conflate this situation to the Ivory allegations, to then dispel the idea that the two incidents are similar. This is done to meticulously play down the severity of this specific situation. Just because the behavior is not indicative of does not now make this behavior acceptable. He was a 19-year-old man messaging a fan significantly younger than himself to create art that conformed to his desires. He used his influence and the power dynamic present once again to have a engage with his. He also attempts to excuse the art they created, which he pushed them into doing by attempting to bring up other examples of or art that they had created, as if that suddenly nullifies his complicity in this situation. Yes, the 15-year-old created artwork beforehand, but how is that now a logical excuse whatsoever for prying her to create content to conform to your desires? It is a completely irrelevant defense, and it obviously is only included to play down the severity of the situation.
I didn't commission it. What was drawn wasn't. They'd drawn very similar stuff before, and there was no roleplay here. It was nothing.
He attempts to feign the idea that he wasn't entirely culpable in this situation, as he did not personally commission the artwork, once again using wordplay manipulation to undermine his involvement. According to the girl who was 15 at the time, she attested to a friend that Niall demanded her to create this content. Even by examining remnants of the Twitter messages between her and Pyrocynical, you could clearly see that he was pestering her for thick content. He was asking her to do it. He openly lies, claiming that the art wasn't, despite the art not only being inherently showing thicker proportions, but also regarding the fact that his character is clearly seen having a and larger defined laying on bed sheets. This art piece was clearly made to elicit a reaction because it was created to conform to Niall's, and the art was intended for purposes. To argue that the creation of this artwork was not to play into Niall's fantasy is simply untrue.
That being said, it was incredibly irresponsible of me and not my best look, I admit. But this isn't at all comparable to the current situation.
Pyrocynical claims to have taken accountability by claiming that it was irresponsible for him to have engaged with this. But then he is seen wedging cheap excuses to belittle the situation or state that it wasn't on the same level of severity as the Ivory allegations, which ultimately only serves to make his accountability statement seem weak and disingenuous. Just because the girl herself stated that the situation should not be taken seriously, once again does not fundamentally change anything, and this situation still serves to show one example of a long reoccurring and concerning pattern of Pyrocynical engaging in either based discussion with or pushing to conform to his desires. Even in this case, Pyrocynical had clearly asked for her age and continued despite her stating that she was 15, but we are meant to magically be under the idea that he never once knew of Ivory's age or once asked for his age from the start of his messages on November the 10th, 2016 to July the 5th, 2017, when Ivory linked his Twitter bio with his age present, which is extremely implausible and hard for anyone to believe. As a result of this video coming out, fans of Pyrocynicals now have the ability to have a larger outlook regarding this entire situation and to come to a new perspective on how bad the age gap and power dynamics were in regards to all these situations, as well as the egregious lies that Niall had pushed to his audience, as well as the misinformation created by other members of his fanbase that had spread, essentially allowing him to get away with his actions unscathed for numerous years. However, I'm certain that many will still attempt to deflect away from the allegations of Pyrocynical by attempting to utilize ad hominems and methods of whataboutism to attack my credibility rather than the validity of my claims. They have also attempted to do this with Ivory himself, when they attempted to create Reddit posts presenting him as some kind of despite him actually having comprehensive message logs displaying a violent dynamic present between him and Pyrocynical that many people didn't decide to break down and actually analyze until now. Pyrocynical fans were also seen doing this in regards to the dupe situation, where they spread false allegations against me, attempting to defame me as a before even hearing my side of the story and before my video and document even came out on Pyrocynical, to preemptively tarnish my credibility so my research would not be taken seriously. It was malicious, it was deliberate, and it was meticulously done, and no matter what character attacks his fanbase present or methods of victim blaming they use against victims, it will not fundamentally change anything and will only make themselves collectively look worse. They'll be seen as immature, ill-tempered, and desperate if they are unable to actually tackle any of the points I make in this video and instead go for weak ad hominem attacks instead. That will just prove how pathetic they all are by drastically attempting to deflect the situation away from the numerous victims of Pyrocynical. Pyrocynical fans will also attempt to utilize the excuse that this happened years ago, despite that defense not being valid whatsoever. The same excuse was levied by Dr. Disrespect fans and even fans of Ava Chris Tyson, who both engaged in inappropriate conduct online with years ago, with Dr. Disrespect engaging inappropriately with an girl in 2017, and Ava Chris Tyson having an expansive history of behavior around from 2016 to 2018. The fact these situations transpired years ago changed nothing. They were adults behaving inappropriately with who are fans of their content. Why should Pyrocynical be treated any different now that it has been proven that he lied about the French girl to his fans in his initial video on Keemstar, as well as his initial Reddit statement, and now that it's been proven that he lied about the Ivory situation on his massive response video to millions of people? Pyrocynical is a proven compulsive liar, and he even avoided addressing the French girl once again in a TBH podcast, and got away with it. His accountability statement in his response video was completely insincere, as he wedged it with constant belittlement and played down the severity of his base dynamic with an fan. He only took partial accountability and then denied the severe aspects of the allegations to give the impression to his fanbase that he was entirely being honest, and it's astonishing how he pulled the wool over hundreds of thousands of people's eyes until now. The other term they use to lambast anyone who calls out Niall as well is claiming that they're a clout chaser. They'll do this to desperately undermine any actual valid points brought up against Pyrocynical and to brush off any actual criticism levied. It's another example of a weak ad hominem made to throw at people to once again attack their character rather than the validity of any of their points. Ultimately, regarding this entire situation, Pyrocynical's response video was filled with lies, and only served to simply just belittle the situation and manipulate his own impressionable viewer base. case. Pyrocynical was never innocent, and large portions of his fanbase allowed misinformation to spread, in which led to victims being silenced, hurt, and harassed. But now is a chance for the truth to come out, and for Pyrocynical to be actually held accountable. His lack of accountability for the French girl situation is just yet more proof of how he's willing to ignore serious situations in hope that it will simply just die down so he can get away with it again. It is stunning to see his audience still defend him to this day, when Niall wouldn't hesitate to lie to their faces about never dating the French girl, or the numerous inconsistencies in his response video regarding Ivory. If Pyrocynical has deliberately manipulated his fans numerous times and refused to be transparent, why do they still relentlessly defend him, except for the fact that they desperately wish to believe he's innocent, and in doing so, they would undermine and discredit actual victims in the process. I hope this video and other videos to follow, along with the release of my document, serves to prompt more victims of Pyrocynical to feel comfortable to come out about their experiences, and I hope the disgusting and malicious mob mentality present inside of Pyrocynical's fanbase can cease, because they're affecting actual victims. In case of my document's deletion, it will be consistently re-uploaded and will be uploaded to archive websites such as Catbox, and PDF files will be present in my Discord server if you wish to download them. I'd also greatly appreciate if you could like and share this video around the community too, in hopes that as many people as possible can actually open their eyes in regards to what actually transpired, and how Pyrocynical was never innocent.